Hi friends, this is Rabbi Bendat-Appell. And this week we are reading Parshat Lech-Lecha. When I read the story of Avram, and I'm thinking about the very beginning of this week's Torah portion, when God calls out to Avram and says he's got to go forth. Lech-Lecha me'artzacha u'mimoladetcha mi'beit avicha el ha'aretz asher areka. Go forth, or go to yourself. We'll come back to that shortly. From your land, from your birthplace, and from your father's house. And go to the land that I will show you. There's so much to say about this verse, and indeed our tradition has so many important ways of understanding really each clause in this verse. And I want to focus on a couple of those things today, but really with this, for the sake of raising up how this points towards an essential quality of this human experience, which is that we're always coming into a new land. We're always coming into a new moment of life, a new experience. Even if it feels quite old and stale, the reality is that it has not happened before. So I'm intrigued as a human being who faces this all the time. How do I orient myself most skillfully, most lovingly, with as much wisdom and courage as I can muster towards my experience, towards the unknown? What an amazing thing. God says, I'm going to take you to where I'm going to show you, to a place that I'm going to show you. Now, when I read that, I have the advantage of knowing how the story goes, where he ends up. But of course, when we step out into the unknown, we do not have the benefit of knowing how the story ends. So how do we work with this experience of stepping into the unknown? And I find that I experience this in ways small and also in quite dramatic ways all the time. The phone rings and I pick it up. And even if I know very well the person who is calling me and I have some sense for what they want to speak to me about, I actually don't know. And coming into that experience as a kind of fresh, with a sense of freshness and newness, is something that's quite profound and also quite challenging. Because it's actually not a foregone conclusion how I orient myself towards that new experience. And so this verse of Lech-Lecha, this verse of this call and this leave-taking, really speaks to what happens when we step into the unknown. One thing to really raise up is that Avram didn't necessarily want to leave. It does not say that he was looking for a ticket out of town and then this call came and he took it. Rather, it just says go. So one thing that we can really affirm when we're thinking about leave-taking is that sometimes we really want to engage in the leave-taking, but I think it's often the case, I know it is in my experience, that sometimes we just know we have to, or the conditions in our lives are making it such that it's what has to happen. So, all the more so, it's important to be really intentional about how we enter into this kind of leave-taking. Also to affirm that it is not easy to let go of the places that we are, the places that we find ourselves being. And this is true on many different levels. And I'm not even focusing so much on the kind of geographical level and sort of dramatic stories of, I lived here, then I moved there. But rather, how do I let go of the things that are holding me? Maybe they've nurtured me and protected me, but is there a point in which it's important to be able to let go of those places so that one can come into a new experience? And as the next verse tells us, Abraham is called forth really so that he could be a blessing and experience blessing and bring blessing into the world. So what do we need to let go of in order to come into an experience of life that is fresh and new. And again, this is it's important to reflect on this on a number of different levels, and not only on these most dramatic of stories in our lives and of events in which we leave one place literally and go to another place. But I'm also thinking about when I come into a conversation with somebody, how can I leave the things that are keeping me locked into a predictable or habitual or a narrow, fixed way of relating to that person or that experience? So the first thing to say is that there are a lot of different things that control how we relate to our experience and really strongly influence and inform how we understand what's happening, how we think about something that's happening, how we relate to the person that we're speaking to. And so the Torah and our tradition really picks up on the three levels of places that Avram needs to leave. Right? First is Artzecha, your land. And then it's Moladetcha. JPS translates it as your native place, your native land. Right? So it's a closer relations near you. But then your closest relations, your family, Mi Beit Avicha, literally your father's house. But you could think of it really as your family of origin. So I wanted to relate a beautiful teaching that Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has on this. And he brings in three important philosophers who really are speaking to how each one of those levels offers a kind of a hold on who we are. So the first one, Artzecha, leave your land. Marx, and this I'm quoting Sachs. Marx said that the human is a product of social forces, themselves shaped by the interest of the ruling class, the owners of property of which the most significant is land. Therefore, God said to Abraham, leave your land. So if we have a Marxist reading of Artzecha, which I think there's a really beautiful, strong case for that, we're saying, what are the things about my country, the society I live in, that keep me narrow and fixed in a predictable, locked-in way of being in my experience? So the first leave-taking is from those constraints. The second, Umi Moladetcha, Spinoza. Spinoza said that the human is made by innate instincts and biological drives. Nowadays, this is called genetic determinism, given by birth. Therefore, God said to Avraham, leave the circumstances of your birth. Umi moladetcha. I like that translation, the circumstances of your birth. What are the things, just from the way my body is, the body that I've inherited, that I didn't choose, that influence how I am present in my experience and how I relate to the possibility of coming into a new land? Lastly, Freud. Freud said that we are the way we are because of the traumas of childhood, the influence of our early years, our relationships and rivalries with our parents, especially our father. Therefore, God said to Abraham, leave your father's house, right? Umi beit avicha in the Hebrew. So I find this incredibly interesting. I would not say that leaving any of these levels of our identity is easy. And actually, it's because it's not easy that it's important to pay attention to it and actually to practice responding to and understanding these three different levels. I also really want to affirm that on each of these levels, there doesn't need to be a value judgment placed upon them. We're not saying the land that you're from is a bad place, or the body that you were given, that you were born with, is a problem, or that your family of origin is a problem, or that they are necessarily that it's necessarily an experience of trauma in childhood that we must transcend by going forth. But rather, what if we just think about each of these different sort of levels of our identity, not as even three totally separate things, but three things that are intertwined and much more complex and related to all other kinds of factors that influence who we are in this moment. But what if we bring our attention to bear on what is controlling us, what is influencing us? And by doing that, we get much more information about where we are, what's controlling us, and then there's the possibility of being able to be more intentional and empowered in knowing when do I need to let go of what's controlling me so I could come into a new manifestation, a new place, a new way of orienting myself to my experience. So maybe we never leave, maybe we never move, maybe we live with our parents our whole lives. Whatever the case, this isn't about necessarily moving. This is about an internal movement. It's not about geography in as much as it's about our hearts and our minds and our bodies. So this week, I'd like to encourage us to explore this. And my kavanah for this week is that we bring a great measure of attention into what is controlling and influencing us as we, in every moment, stand on the precipice of coming into a new land, a new experience, a new moment of life. So if we affirm and have faith that the movement forward is one that is towards blessing and bringing blessing into the world, we also have to really pay attention to what we need to let go of so that we could come into that new expression of who we are. And again, it is not a judgment on where we're coming from necessarily, but rather it's about affirming that life is a continual process of growth. And in fact, from the very first moment we're born, we are leave-taking. We are moving forward. We never stop. Even if we never move our geographical location, we never stop. And so the Sfat Emet on this week's Parsha really affirms that the human being is a walker, mahalach, somebody who's always moving forward, going from rung to rung to rung. If we think that we stopped, if we think we've gotten to the end, that may be problematic. And so this week, let us pay attention to where we are for the sake of going forward and for the sake of bringing blessing into the world. Thank you so much.